Hey there and welcome to BYJU'S 9th and 10th grade channel. I'm your teacher Aishwarya, and in this short and sweet video, I'm going to quickly tell you all the important diagrams that will come in your examination for all of you 9th graders. So if this video is something that you were looking for, then this is your one-stop solution for the same. Now, of course, if you haven't subscribed to the channel already, don't forget to hit the like button and the subscribe button on the channel. Now, of course, when we talk about the important diagrams from biology in your CBSE syllabus as per NCERT, there are only 3 chapters as per the rationalized syllabus. So, we have the fundamental unit of life, then of course we have the tissues chapter, and last but not the least, we have the improvement wala chapter. Now, from this, chances of diagram-based questions are much higher in the fundamental unit of life and tissues, which is why we will cover these 2 chapters in great extent, and we will quickly go over the chapter which is improvement. So let's get started, everybody. Now, as you can see, this is your NCERT textbook, and I'm going to quickly have my pen diagram ready. And in the first page itself of your NCERT, you would see that there is a diagram of the compound microscope. Now, this particular diagram that is given to us, which is of the compound microscope, at times can be asked in the examination, where they might give you this particular diagram. Like in some schools they do ask that, where they give you the diagram and then they'll ask you to identify what is this, or what is this particular lens, what is the stage. And here normally case questions can come, right? So here we're talking about case-based questions, where then they may either ask you questions which are based on cell discovery and talking about who was the one who discovered cell, or they can ask you in the other aspects where they may give you even a section of the cell and try to identify what kind of cell it is. Which is why in this particular case, right, as you see when we go down, I'm just going to move a little lower. So as you see here in this particular diagram, which is of the onion peel, this is again something that they can ask you for MCQs, they can ask you for 2 marks or case-based questions. Now students, understand that questions which are based off section under a microscope, section of either onion peel, it could be cheek cells, or it could be maybe of any other structure, they could ask you how it looks under the microscope. Similarly, even observations of cork cells under the microscope could be something that you can get in the examination. Now, as we go down, the next diagram that we come across are the different types of cells that are there in the human body. For example, we have nerve cell, blood cell, smooth cell, ovum, and all of that. Now, ideally, they will not ask you to draw these diagrams. Please remember, these diagrams are not something that they will ask you. Nerve cell, yes, for nervous tissue in the next chapter, they can ask you to draw. But in this case, chances of questions based on this and coming are very less. But the concept that it is based upon, that different cells have different shape and structure in order to carry out specific functions, is a concept that will come for assertion reason, or it can come for 2 marks to justify. So this diagram and concept is something that you will have to remember. Now, of course, the next big topic that we're going to have is plasma membrane or the cell membrane. Now, in this particular diagram as well, or in this particular topic, if you see, as per the textbook, there are not many diagrams given to us. If I scroll through the entire one, you will see no diagrams. But let me tell you one thing. Topics which are based on diffusion, right? So topics which are based on diffusion and osmosis can come for diagram based questions, especially when we have a look at the tonicity of cells, right, or tonicity of solutions, and what would happen if I keep a cell in hypotonic solution or hypertonic, what would happen. Those kind of topics that we cover under this could be represented as diagrams. For example, if this is my raisin, I kept it in a solution which then made the raisin look like this. So then they will ask you what kind of solution was it kept in, what is the process that has happened here, what would happen if I keep this cell in, let's say, a beaker full of pure water. So now what has happened? There is no diagram given to you in the textbook. but the concept that is mentioned in the textbook has been represented diagrammatically, which is why this is something that you can definitely expect your schools to give you questions on this topic, right? So don't forget that whatever you study, you must learn it visually as well. And in case if you want to learn it visually, as you all know, nowhere else will you find this kind of visualization happening other than the BYJU'S the Learning app. So you can go ahead and check out the app. The link is available in the description. You can go to our Shopify website and have a look at the BYJU'S app and learn extensively, not just for your annual exam but also for your grade 10 as well. So everyone, do check it out. Now of course, let's move on as we go below, right? The next topic that we encounter is cell wall and nucleus. Now, if you talk about cell wall, nucleus and all of this, in this case, I would scroll down all the way to page number 55 as per rationalized textbook, and we would have a look at the diagram of the animal cell. Now, if you see, we have the diagram of the animal cell, and just above in the previous page, we have the diagram of the prokaryotic cell. Now they can ask you to identify the cell, identify whether it is a prokaryotic or eukaryotic cell, and they may ask you to differentiate between the two. So MCQ, case-based, 2 marks, 3 marks can come on the same. For them to ask you to draw prokaryotic cells, chances are less, but learn to draw the diagram as well. Similarly, they can ask you in some cases, see in 9th grade, because your school is setting the paper, they could ask you for animal cell and to draw the animal cell. So learn about the animal cell and the different parts as well. And of course, individually, the SCR, the plasma, not the plasma membrane, sorry, but the ribosomes, mitochondria, and the Golgi can be asked individually, where they may ask you, identify this structure, which organelle is it, what is the function, how does it help in membrane biogenesis. So these are type of questions which can come. So even though individually for cell organelles, you do not have diagrams given in the textbook, go through this diagram. It is super duper important, students. Please don't skip this diagram. Similarly, I would say the same for the plant cell diagram given to you as figure 5.6. They can give you this diagram. They can ask you case questions from this diagram, identify different cell organelles, maybe draw the cell organelle in some cases if your school is asking for it. So go through the diagrams because this is super important. Now, as we go down, we've covered all the different cell organelles, and the last diagram that is going to be there is going to be the mitosis and meiosis. Now, here chances of them asking you to draw the diagram is very less. But they will ask you this diagram and they will ask you to identify what type of division is happening, let's say in this case. Where else do you see this division happening? And what can you tell about this division? In which parts of the body do we see this? On the other hand, they can ask you, okay, can you differentiate between the diagram given above and the kind of cell division that happens in the sex cells or in the gametes? So thereby, you need to be able to write the answers when such diagrams are given to you, right? They are very, very important. Yes? So now, of course, if you see, even though this particular chapter seems easy, there are some topics for which the diagrams are not effectively given in the textbook, but you should be able to interpret the diagram and understand the concept. Now, drawing again is subjective because I know that as per CBSE 10th board, chances of them asking you to draw diagrams are very rare, right? They will give you a diagram and then they will ask you to interpret, right? Maybe identify A, B, C, D. That's how it happens in grade 10. But in grade 9, because it's conducted by your schools, please follow what is mentioned. And that's why I said in some cases, if your teacher has asked you to learn the diagram to draw it, please learn how to draw it. Yes? Now let's move on to the next chapter, which is tissues. So I hope that all of you can see this on my screen. Yes? So we have tissues, which is the next chapter. Now in tissues, as you see, the first diagram that we will encounter is that of the meristematic tissues. Now here, if you see, let me just reduce the size a little bit so that I can fit the diagram. So as you can see, meristematic tissue and the positioning of this is very important. And they can ask you to identify what is A, B, C, right? And they'll ask you which part is responsible for elongation of stem, which is responsible for increase of girth, right? So such kind of questions can be asked. Now, in some cases, they can also give you a section wherein they may give you some polygonal cells, or they'll give you oval cells which have no vacuole and a thin cell wall. So they will tell you that the section above has, they'll describe the characteristic of the cell. So they'll say that the section above has thin cell wall, no vacuole, and is continuously dividing. Identify the cells, identify the tissue to which they belong. So here characteristics can also be represented in the form of diagram. So please always do not forget to learn to interpret the characteristics as well. Now, of course, as we go down, the next that we come across are the permanent tissues. Now, this diagram that is given to us is that of the section of the stem. And they'll not ask you to draw this in your examination. Chances are very, very less. But in case, if they do ask you, they could ask you with respect to identifying epidermis and the vascular bundles, because those are the easiest. I would say that don't learn to draw the diagram unless it's been specified by your school. This is a simple diagram that most likely will not come in the exam, but go through it nonetheless, right? So now we will move on to the next one. Now, types of simple tissues are very, very important. They are super duper important. Please don't skip this no matter what. Questions based on parenchyma, collenchyma, sclerenchyma will come in the exam. They will ask you identify the diagram. Sometimes with respect to sclerenchyma, they can ask you to draw it as well. So learn to draw and learn to interpret the diagrams, because for sure questions based on this will be there in the exam. Similarly, if you look at epidermal cells as well, the surface view that you see right here, this diagram also can be asked for case-based questions. So in case if you've not checked out our top 30 most important questions for biology and the 100 PYQs and mock papers, please have a look at those videos. The link is available in the description, because in those papers we have covered some in-depth diagram-based cases that can come in your examination. So this is something that you will have to learn to identify. Drawing, again, chances are less, but identifying and interpreting is more important, because they can ask you a question differentiate between what you see on top versus this diagram given here. Now, both are protective tissues, but that is an epidermal tissue, while these right here are seen in older plants and these are cork. The depositions that we see in cork is very different to what we may find in the cuticle layer. So these kind of differences can be asked based on diagrams. Next up, we have our complex permanent tissue. Students, I will almost bet on it that questions based on these diagrams can come in the examination, especially with respect to xylem and phloem. They will ask you identify what is, what is A, B and C. Here they can ask you this as A, B, C and D. What is the function of C? What is the function of A? What is the function of B? Case-based questions, 5-mark questions can come on all of these diagrams. Please go through it in great detail. Don't skip these diagrams, because these are short questions that can come in the examination. Next up, we have our animal tissues, and under animal tissues, if you see, please go through the structures of squamous, stratified squamous, cuboidal and columnar, because again they can ask you this particular diagram. Yes, so let this diagram just load. So as you see, these diagrams can come in the examination where they will show you some flattened cells, right? So they may give you a top view of some flattened cells, right? And then they'll ask you, where do you find these flattened cells, right? Or they can ask you an MCQ based question as to which among the following parts would most likely have these kind of cells as their inner layers, right? So again, structure function you must be able to associate. Same goes for cuboidal cells and the columnar cells and the stratified tissue. Now, as we go down, right, as we go down, we see that we come and we encounter more and more different kinds of tissues which have more labelings. So if you look at the concept here that is given, they have given you more details. For example, you have types of WBCs where you have neutrophils, eosinophils, basophils. Now here the intent is not for you to learn the important functions of each, because that's not covered in the NCERT. But what you do need to know is that WBCs are not of the same type, right? That's what the learning here is. Tomorrow, if they give you this diagram, you need to be able to identify what category of cells they belong to, which tissue they belong to. That is what they are looking for. So if they ask you what is a function, what are these cells and to which tissue do they belong? So you must be able to say that these are all the white blood cells of our body which belong to the fluid connective tissue, that is the blood. So that is why these diagrams are important. Similarly, they can give you maybe red blood cells, which is a little more discoid, and they can ask you to differentiate between these two diagrams. Drawing is again very less. Adipose tissue diagram is important, which is the I would say more than the adipose tissue diagram here. They can give this to you and label the fat droplet, and they'll ask you which cell is being labeled, which tissue does it belong to, what is the function, why do we see that there is a thick fat of blubber in animals, let's say in the colder regions when compared to, let's say, of people living in India, right? So these diagrams are again very important. When I say important, like I said, I'm not just telling you that all diagrams are important, sab pad lo. No, I'm also telling you what kind of questions you can expect, right? So that's what I want you to pay attention to that. You shouldn't come later and comment saying, "Arey ma'am ne bola ki sab important hai." Sabhi important hai, lekin what kind of questions can you expect? Do you need to learn how to draw this? No, unless and until specified by your teacher, right? But most importantly, diagram-based questions can come. And that is what I'm focusing on and I'm telling you in greater detail. Yes? Okay. Next up, the diagram that you see on muscle tissues are very important. Chances of them asking you to draw is important. Or they will ask you, differentiate between the three kinds of muscular tissue we find in our body. Or they can ask you this diagram and ask you questions based on which muscular tissue is shown in the diagram, where do we find this muscular tissue located, how is this different from the tissue located in our heart. So here, as you can see, I've just explained a 5-mark question that can come based on this one diagram. So you should be thorough with the concept of muscular tissue. Yes? Now as we move on, we'll go on to the last short diagram that they will pakka ask you to draw. Whether it's in 9th standard or whether it's in 10th standard, learn to draw this diagram of neuron, because neuron diagram zarur aayega exam mein. So please everybody, questions either asking you to label the neuron, asking you to draw the neuron, questions based on the neuron, whatever it is, don't skip neuron topic. It is very important. So as you see, maximum number of diagram-based questions will come from the chapters, which is fundamental unit of life and tissues. Now the last one that we have here is improvement in food resources. Now from this, the chances of diagram-based questions are very less. Maximum, if as we go through this, right, if we were to look at it, this diagram on intercropping can be asked, where they'll give you this diagram and they'll say identify what kind of cropping pattern is observed here. Now how will you identify? It's very easy. In intercropping, I've always told you that the crops are sown in a specific pattern, right? So there is a specific pattern that is being followed when we practice intercropping. So when you see that there's a certain pattern in which the crops are sown, you can identify it as intercropping. Then of course, as we go down, we see that they'll not ask you to identify whether this is indigenous or whether it is hybrid. They may ask you questions based on the same. And in this case, at times questions based on Asil and Leghorn can come. That is, Asil is an indigenous breed, Leghorn here is a high exotic breed, and how we get hybrid breeds from the same. Then of course, here in this case, if you see under fisheries, mainly this concept of composite fish farming, right? Composite fish farming can be asked to you and they can represent it as a diagram, in the sense that they could give you a pond or a specific tank, and they'll say that you have some top feeders, middle feeders and bottom feeders, and they can put these diagrams of, let's say, Catla, Mrigal, Carp, and they can put it in their respective zones. And then they'll ask you to identify what kind of farming it is, why do we practice fish farming, composite fish farming, what are the advantages. So they could ask you questions again based on that, right? Then of course we have it towards the end on beekeeping. See, with beekeeping, always learn about that one topic that we tend to skip is that of pasturages, because we feel like our beekeeping is very simple. We don't need to go through it in greater detail. It's very easy. But go through why, pasturages are important, why the quality of flowers are important. They may not give you a diagram, or they may represent a picture where you will see that in a beekeeping or in a farm, same kind of flowers are kept, right? Same kind of flowers are kept, and they may ask you, what would happen to the quality of honey if I keep only one type of flower which produces nectar, versus, let's say, a farm that has different types of flowers. So these are some kind of diagram based questions that may come, but chances are very less. So students, I hope that all of you have made a note of the important pointers that we have just discussed. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to let me know in the comments of this video. And of course, if you have any more doubts, please make sure that you let me know in the comments. Our team will be soon to reply to all of you. So thank you so much everybody for staying with me till the very end. I wish you all the very best for your exams, because I know you're going to do well. Yes? So hoping to see you all soon. Up until then, take care, lots of love, and bye-bye.